To our cherished listeners, especially all level 100 students offering communication skills GPD 111 this semester. So you are welcome to our radio lecture series this morning. Okay, so last week we looked at academic discourse 1 and within the broad concept of discourse community. And we agree that based on the definition of what discourse community is, according to John Swales, and all the various characteristics he propounded about discourse community, then the university is also a discourse community, and we refer to the university as a discourse community as an academic discourse community. So we have a common goal that has brought all of us here together, and that we use communication to achieve this common goal. So this morning, we are going to focus on communication that we use to achieve this common goal. So we are going to look at what communication is, the elements of communication, the forms of communication, the types of communication, and then barriers of communication. So my cherished level 100 students, let's begin. So the first question we want to ask ourselves is, what is communication? What is communication? So try to put something down. What do you think? You've been communicating. So what do you think is communication? Okay, very good. So let's look at what the definition of communication. So communication can be defined as the transmission or transfer of information or message from a source to a receiver, or we would say that it is the sharing of information. And in this sharing of information, we have to make sure that we make meaning, or we exchange meaning. So if we do not exchange meaning, then we cannot say that communication has taken place. And then again, it is a process. And this process is taken through the elements of what? Communication. So it begins from the source through a channel to a receiver. So there is a message that is carried from someone, which we would also refer to as the encoder, and then the encoder picks a channel and then puts the message across to a receiver. So in this sharing of meaning, or this sharing of information, we use a code. We use a code, we use symbols, we use signs, or we use what? Language. And communication can be between a person to another person. It can be from a person to a group. It can be from a group to another group. So that's about communication. So this exchange of meaning, like I said, is carried through a common symbol, which can either be a code, a sign, or a behavior. So we have certain language skills which we engage anytime we are involved in what? Communicating. So these language skills are 4. We have 4 language skills that we use. So we have the listening skills, the speaking, reading, and then writing. So I'll take that again, the 4 language skills that we use in sharing or exchanging of meaning. We have listening, speaking, reading, and then writing. Then the first 2, which is listening and then speaking, are referred to as the primary language skills, because they are the basic or the fundamental skills that we acquire as individuals. So if you, for instance, you pick a baby, the first skill that language skill that a baby would exhibit is listening. And then the baby would then move to what? Speaking. So they are the primary language skills. Then the secondary language skills, which we would acquire when we start formal education, is reading and what? Writing. Then out of these 4 language skills, we have the skills that we use to receive information. So looking at the 4 skills I have mentioned, which of them do you think you use for receiving information? Okay, very good. So you would see that we use what? The listening and then reading to receive what? Information. And we refer to them as what? Receptive skills. Then we have those that we use to produce information, which is the speaking and then the writing. So those are your productive language skills. So we've just talking about what? The language that we use in communicating. And in communicating and using language, we have certain skills that we use, and we have the receptive and then the productive language skills. Now let's move to the elements of communication. With the elements of communication, we have the source or the encoder being the first element of what? Communication. Then we have the message, we have the channel or medium, we have the receiver, and then we have the feedback. So we would take them one after the other and look at it. So the source is also referred to as the speaker or the encoder, the writer, the composer. So I have a certain information and I want to share it with either an individual or a group of people or a friend. So I am the person who wants to put the information across. So I would initiate the conversation, or I would start the process of what? Communication. So I have an information to share. If it's a music I want to share, then I would be the one to what? Compose the music. If it's an article I want to write, then I'll be the one to what? Do the writing. So that is what? The source. Then the source will now generate what we call the message or the information. So that is the content I want to convey to my listener. So that is what? The message. And the message can either be verbal or non-verbal, based on the context within which I am communicating. I can decide to either make it verbal, my message verbal, or non-verbal. Then we have the medium or the channel, which is the means through which I would put across or convey the information I want to send to someone. So it can either be a face-to-face interaction, or it can be a telephone, use the telephone. It can be letter, a report, a book. Those are some examples. So after our interaction, you can read more and get other examples. So that is what the medium. So I have a message I want to put across. After crafting my message, or after putting my message together, I have to select an appropriate channel to send my message to whoever I want to put the message across to. Then we have the receiver. That is the individual who gets the message. So, and other names we can use is the decoder, the destination, the recipient, or it can either be what? The reader. So the receiver or the decoder receives the message and try to understand or make interpretation or decode the message I have put across, or the sender has sent to the individual. Then after that, we have the feedback. The feedback, which is a very important element when it comes to the elements of what? Communication, because the feedback helps us to evaluate the interaction, or to assess whether there's been what? An exchange of what? Meaning. the feedback would communicate to the sender whether the message I intend to put across has been received the way I want it to be received. So the feedback can equally be verbal or non-verbal response to the message from the receiver to the sender. And in some cases, the feedback can be an answer to a question, or it can be a question for clarification, or it can equally be what the receiver sending across or putting across another information. Now, when it comes to the feedback, we have two types of feedback. So we have the intended feedback and then the unintended feedback. Now, the intended feedback is the expected response. The expected response. And then the unintended feedback is not the expected response. So let's try to give some examples so that we can get a clear picture of intended feedback and unintended feedback. So for instance, when you meet a friend and you greet the friend good morning, you would expect that your friend will respond by equally saying good morning and trying to find out how you are doing. But when you say good morning and then the friend responds by saying, oh, I don't want to see you, that is not what you are expecting from the friend, because this is a friend. It's not an enemy. So you are expecting that the friend would share pleasantries with you and try to find out how you are doing. So that becomes an unintended feedback. However, when you meet the friend and you say good morning and the friend equally responds good morning and how are you, and then that becomes what? The intended feedback. So that is feedback. It is very important. Feedbacks are important because they help us, either the sender or the source, to evaluate whether the intended message we want to put across has been received the way we intend it to be. So that if there is a communication or the person did not understand us, we take the necessary action to restructure our information or to re-encode in order to make sure that our receiver receives the message the way we intend it to be. Very good. So we started this lesson by looking at what communication is. We've defined what communication is. We said that it is sharing of what information, and at the end of the day, meaning has to be exchanged. If meaning is not exchanged, we have not communicated. And that we use certain signs, symbols to communicate. And in using these signs and symbols, we equally use what? Language. And we have certain language skills that we use, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Then we came to the elements of what? Communication, elements of communication. And we say that we have the source, we have the message, we have the medium, we have the receiver, and we have the feedback. These are the 5 elements of what? Communication. And in communicating out of these elements, the feedback is very important because it helps us to evaluate the communication in order to find out whether meaning has been what? Exchanged. And under feedback, we have the intended feedback and unintended feedback. Very good. Now let's move on and look at the the forms of communication. So when it comes to the forms of communication, we have 2, which is verbal and non-verbal. So when it's verbal, it is when we communicate through the use of what? Language. When we communicate through the use of language, and it can be written or spoken. Then non-verbal, which is communication that takes place without the use of language. So that is what? The forms of communication. We have verbal and non-verbal. Now, when it comes to non-verbal, which is communicating without the use of language, we have some various manifestations of what? Non-verbal communication. In fact, there are things that you have been doing in all your communication, but today you are going to learn the technical names for those non-verbal signs or symbols you've been using in your communication. So let's look at the first one. We have chronemics. I'll take that again. Chronemics, which is the use of time in communication. The use or the role of time in communication. So what is your perception about time? How do you perceive time? Are you someone who takes time seriously? Are you punctual to your lectures? Are you punctual to your group discussions? When you have meetings with others, do you go on time? Or you are someone who do not care about time and you would always go to occasions very late. So that is what? Chronemics. And then we have the next one, which is proxemics, which is the use of space and distance in communication. So the distance between two communicators can equally communicate the relationship between those two individuals. Or even as individuals, let's take it that as students, you are the sender and you want to send a message to your lecturer who is the receiver. There is a certain kind of distance that would be between you and your lecturer. You cannot stand very far from the lecturer and be throwing words at the lecturer. That would be interpreted as what? A disrespect. So you would come closer to the lecturer in order to what? Communicate or send your message to the lecturer. However, if it's a friend and it's a very close friend and based on the kind of intimate relationship you share with the friend, you can be at a distance and send a message across to the friend and it will not be interpreted as what? Disrespect. So that is what? Proxemics, where we are looking at the use of what? Space and what? Distance between two individuals who are engaged in what? Communication. So that is that. Then we have kinesics, which is the use of body movements such as gesture, posture, and facial expression to communicate. So we can have facial expressions such as smiling, having a frown. They can communicate. Your body posture, you are talking to someone, you have your hand on your waist or you are standing akimbo. All those body postures would communicate something to the person you are engaged in communication with. And based on the person, you can't have certain body postures or gestures or facial expression. You can't be talking to an elderly person and then be throwing your hands all over the place. So those are some of the non-verbal communication. Then we have vocalics, which is the use of sounds or voice during communication. So we have, for instance, when you clear your throat whilst talking to someone, you know, sometimes you are gossiping. Normally when you are gossiping, a typical example, when you are gossiping about someone and your back is to the person and you are not aware that the person has come to wherever you are standing and gossiping about the person. Someone can clear the throat to indicate that the person you're gossiping about is around. Or sometimes you are on the phone and just to let the other person across the line is talking and just to let the person know that, oh, you are listening, you can make a sound from your throat. Those kind of sounds. That is what? Vocalist. Or it can even be yawning. So someone is talking to you and you yawn. It can be interpreted that you are not interested in what the person is saying, or you are tired. So that is vocalist. Then we have haptic. Haptic, which is the use of touch in communication. So we have high five, we have handshake, a rub at the back, a tap on the shoulder, a kiss. All those are forms of what? A haptic communication, when you use touch to communicate. So that is that. Then we have objectics. Objectics, which is the use of our environment, clothes, artifacts to communicate. So, for instance, a typical example is that until recently, when people wear black in our Ghanaian setting, then it means the person is mourning. Now it has become a fashion, so we can't determine when black is mourning. But however, sometimes when the person dresses in black and adds a black scarf, then you are forced to interpret that the person is what? Is mourning. Or you are interested in a lady, and then at a point in time you see her with a ring on the left finger, then that object indicates that she's taken, she's married, so you can't have her. So those are some examples of objects. Or even in our environment, when we go to the lecture room, based on the fact that there is a white marker board and there are desks and all those other objects there, we can quickly make the interpretation that, okay, this is what? A lecture hall. And when we get to a building or an auditorium, which is a place of worship, maybe there is the sign of the cross, there is a podium where the pastor will stand and preach. All those objects there would let you know that, okay, this is a place of what? Worship. And then when we get to the shrine, all the other objects there communicate to us that this is what? A shrine. So that is what? Objectic. So we have just looked at some forms of what? Non-verbal communication. We looked at chronemics, we looked at proxemics, we looked at kinesics, ocleasic, haptic, vocalics, objectics, and then haptic. Now we want to look at, so if you have questions, begin to put your questions down. A time would come where we would open the lines and you can call in to ask questions or make contributions. And then the number is, you can put the number down, 0503923158. I'll take it again, 0503923158. So it is a call-in line. You can send an SMS or you can what? WhatsApp through the same line. Okay, now let's go on with our interaction. So we want to look at types of communication. So the first we would look at is intrapersonal communication, which is communicating within the self or communicating with oneself. So when you engage in self-talk, that is what we refer to as what? Intra. The word is intra. And we have motivation, when you motivate yourself. We have when you try to reflect on something, when you try to meditate on something, or when you try to make a decision or plan with yourself. That is what? Intrapersonal communication. Then we have the interpersonal. So the first one is intra, and this is inter, which is communication between two or more individuals. And when it comes to the interpersonal communication, we have two types. We have dyadic, which is communication strictly between two individuals. So, for example, between a student and a lecturer, so two individuals. Then between a boyfriend and his girlfriend, or between a mother and a doctor, or a father and a son. So those are examples of what? Dyadic. And then we have the small group communication, which is the interaction or communication between 3 or more. So it can be 3, 4, 5, or 6 individuals in a group, and that is what we would refer to as what? Small group communication. Then we have public communication. Public communication, which is from one source to a large number of what? Individuals. So example would be what happens in our lecture rooms. So you have the lecturer and then the students. So one source, the information. So the information, the sender is your lecturer, and then the recipients or the receivers are the students, which is a large number of what? Individuals. So that is public communication. Then we have mass communication, which is the transmission of information from a single source to a large number of unseen audience. A large number of unseen audience, and it is normally through a mediated medium. A typical example is what is going on this morning. So I am the single source, and then all the listeners, or all level hundreds, or everyone who is tuned in this morning to listen to this radio lecture are the large number of what? Unseen. I can't see my audience. You also can't see me. However, maybe those using the Facebook Live, but even that is online. Okay, so that is what? Mass communication. So we have either through the radio, the television, or the newspaper. These are examples of what? Mass communication. Then when it comes to these types of communication, we have in some instances where there can be feedback. So when there is an instance where you cannot receive feedback, there is no way the source can receive feedback, then we say it is monolineal. I'll take that again, monolineal. However, if there can be receiving of feedback, then it is bilineal. And then when it is in, let's say, the small group communication, where we have multiple individuals engaged in the feedback, where there is a give and take, then it becomes what? Multiple lineal. So I hope we got that. So we've just looked at types of what? Communication. We have the intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, public communication, and then mass communication. Now, we want to move on to look at certain things that can hinder our communication, what we refer to as what? Barriers of communication, where things that can prevent us from exchanging meaning. We have stressed here that we can only say that communication has taken place when meaning is what? Exchanged. So we want to avoid everything in order to make sure that anytime we engage in any interaction or conversation, meaning is what? Exchanged. So we want to look at anything that prevents or obstructs or limits or impede our communication, what we refer to as what? The barriers. So it affects the receiving of messages or prevents meaning from being shared. Now let's look at some of the barriers of communication. So we have physical barrier, psychological barrier, language or linguistic barrier, transmission barrier, and then prejudice. So these, we'll take them one after the other. So let's look at the physical barrier. So this refers to things in the environment or natural conditions that can prevent us from communicating meaningfully. So you can have noise, poor lighting, poor ventilation, or overload of what? Information. So let's take our lecture rooms and let's assume we are having a 5:30 p.m. to an 8:30 p.m. lecture. And then the lighting system is not good in the lecture hall. Definitely, it's going to affect the exchange of meaning during that lecture. We might not get what is expected of us. And then if there is a lot of noise, for instance, sometimes we are at the lecture hall and other students on the veranda or the corridor are just making noise, you realize that you cannot hear what your lecturer is saying, so meaning cannot be shared. So we want to avoid these noises when others are in lecture, so that we can exchange what? Meaning, or information can be shared meaningfully whilst we are at what? Our lecture halls. And then overload of information. When you give too much information, there is a certain amount of information that is expected anytime we are engaged in what? Information. Too much of it might not help, and too little of it too might not help. So these are some examples of what? Physical barrier. Then we want to look at psychological barrier. So these are emotional, or the emotional state of what? Our receivers or the person during the time of what? The interaction. So if you are not happy or you are sad, it can affect the way you receive or exchange information with others. So we want to advise our students that anytime we are going for lectures or any interaction, we should try as much as possible to be in what? Happy mood. We should have positive energy. We should carry ourselves with that kind of energy, so that when we go for lectures, we can be able to have meaningful interaction with what? Our lecturers and then our colleagues when we go for lectures. So that is what? Psychological barrier. When your emotions or the state of your emotion prevents you from having meaningful interaction or conversation. Then we want to talk about language or linguistic barrier. So we have instances where there are differences between language. Let's take, for instance, you meet someone who is speaking French and you do not understand French, you cannot speak French. The person will say a whole chain of words and you wouldn't even be able to understand one thing in order to what? Give whatever help the person needs. So that becomes what? A language barrier. So when we do not understand each other's language, it becomes a challenge in communicating. And then when there is the use of unfamiliar words or expressions, that also can become a language or a linguistic barrier. And then your choice of words, when the register or the lexis you are using is above the level of the person you are engaged in communication with. You know that here we are being trained to become teachers. So when we go back and we are teaching, we have to be mindful of the levels we are taking. The level of or the choice of words you would use for a student in primary school will not be the same that you would use for someone in junior high or senior high. So our choice of words can equally become a language barrier. Then the last one under language barrier is grammatical error or in our sentences. So our use of past and present tense and all that, or subject verb agreements. It can become a linguistic barrier when we don't use the correct grammatical words. Then we have transmission barrier, and this has to do with technological challenges. So the use of an inappropriate channel, or you have poor internet connection. So let's look at, for instance, you want to send a message across to your grandmother in the village and you want to use an email. You can imagine. How is your grandmother going to receive that message? So it's very important. As a sender, you have to be mindful of the kind of medium you use. So if you don't choose the appropriate medium, then there is going to be what? A transmission barrier. And then we can have poor internet connections. And normally that is beyond our control. We can't control it. It has to do with network problem. And sometimes it has to do with the environment. So if you know that where you are, there is a particular network that can work appropriately, then it would be best you choose that network over the kind of network you are using. Then we have maybe a problem with your phone. Then you would have to change your phone, or if it's the battery, you get your battery charge and all that. So that is with transmission barrier. Then we have the last barrier to communication, which is prejudice. Prejudice. So prejudice is a perceived opinion or a kind of negative attitude that an individual has towards a certain group of people. So there is a group of people, for instance, I'm not going to give a very typical example because I want to be careful, but so I would just speak a bit vaguely. You are from a certain kind of, let's say, tribe, and you look down on another group of tribe. So you would always have, because of that preconceived mindset that you have, anytime that you are engaged in communication with someone from that tribe, you might be looking down on the person. And that would prevent you from receiving the kind of information or the necessary information you should receive from the person. So as much as possible in this discourse community, we want to be open-minded. We want to be down to earth. We want to respect every individual we come across, so that when we engage in any interaction, we would be able to give as well as receive the necessary information that we need, so that we can communicate. That is, meaning can be exchanged. So you want to avoid all those negative attitude or negative biases that you have towards a certain group of people. Some might not even be an ethnic group. It can be you are a male and you think that all women are or behave in a certain way, or all women are like this. And anytime you are engaged in conversation with women, you bring that up, it will prevent you from getting anything meaningful from women anytime you come across them. So we want to avoid all of that. Okay, so thank you very much. Now I want to listen or hear from our students. So we have looked at communication, because in looking at discourse community, we say that we have a common interest and we use communication in order to achieve that interest. So today we've looked at what communication is. In order to achieve our interest, we've looked at what communication is, the types, the forms, and then the things we are supposed to do to avoid any kind of barrier, so that at the end of the day, in order to achieve our common goals, we can exchange meaning. Thank you very much. The number again is 0503923158. I'll take it again. 0503923158. Okay. Okay, so we have a caller on the line. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good
So
morning.
I left something out. Please, when you call, tell us your name and then the department from which you are calling from. Okay, so please go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please, I'm Georgia Samwa,
Okay.
Integrated Science Department
Okay.
at South Campus.
Okay, so your question.
Please, my question is about the forms of communication.
Okay.
To say verbal and then
Non-verbal. Okay.
Yes. And then I want to find out if the deaf, the using of sign language, is it a verbal or non-verbal?
I think that will be non-verbal since it is sign language.
Please, you say since it is sign language.
It is sign. So,
okay, so
yeah,
it's
non-verbal. Yeah. So we in.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, please, your level.
Please, you say?
Your level, in which level? You are
Level
in
100.
level 100. Okay. So thank you very much for your question. So that would be
Okay.
a non-verbal. So that is
Okay,
communication without words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So when you use words, then it is verbal.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have another caller on the line. So please, you tell us your name, your department, and then your level.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you speak up loud?
Yes, please.
Okay.
My name is Bright Owusubotin
Okay, Bright.
from the English department.
Okay. Go ahead with level.
Yeah, level 100.
Level 100. Okay. Go ahead with your question.
Barrier of communication.
Sorry?
You made the barriers of communication.
Yes, yes.
You gave some list of barriers. And so I was a bit confused about the grammatical errors. Is it part of the language or linguistic barriers, or is a barrier on its own?
No. So when I was explaining, do you have any other question, or that's the question?
Oh, that's it.
Okay, so thank you for your question. So when I was explaining, I mentioned with the barriers, I mentioned the physical barrier, and then I mentioned psychological barrier. I mentioned linguistic or language barrier. So under the linguistic and language barrier, we have the grammatical error, where let's say you say the boy is going, instead of saying the boy is going to school, you say the boy are going to school. It becomes a challenge if you are having a conversation with someone and all your tenses and then your subject verb, they are not agreeing. It becomes a challenge. So it falls under the linguistic stroke language barrier. So
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, so I have another caller. Please, your name. Yeah, hello. Your name, your department, and then the level.
Please, my name is Amos Esedulabi,
Okay.
Biological Department.
Sorry?
Amos Esedulabi, Biological Department.
Okay. Your level.
Please, level 100.
Okay. So go ahead with your question.
Please, on the types of feedback, the intended and unintended feedback.
Yes, please.
Please, the explanation for unintended feedback, I didn't get it.
Okay. So when it comes to, thank you for the question. When it comes to unintended feedback, that is the unexpected or not the expected response. That is not the kind of response you are expecting. So let me give another example to see if you can get it clearly. So for instance, we are in school and then, God forbid, an individual is called that the mother has passed away or the father has passed away, and you expect that the person will start wailing and crying, but the moment they say it, the person starts laughing. That's become an unintended feedback because that is not the expected response we are expecting from the person. So I don't know if that helps you. Hello, Amos.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so I have another caller on the line.
Hello.
Yes, hello, good morning. Tell us your name. Hello, good morning. Tell us your name, the department. Hello. Hello. Sorry about that. There is another caller. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Good morning. Please,
morning.
yeah, your name, the department you are calling from, and your level. Hello.
My name is Justice Mbungu.
Okay, so Justice, which department and then your level?
100. History department.
Sorry?
History department.
History. Okay, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I want to ask this question. You make mention that
Yes.
if meaning have not shown, it means communication has not taken place.
If meaning is not shared.
It means communication is not taking place.
Yes, please.
Assuming you send information to somebody,
Yes.
maybe the person might want to thank. It means before the person feedback, it means communication have not taken place.
Please, I did not get your question. Can you
If the
restructure?
message
Yeah.
has been sent
Yeah.
without response,
Without
it means
response.
that time communication has not taken place.
Okay, so in our interaction this morning, I said the feedback is very important, and that's when I put a message across, or even you, Justice, when you put a message across, until you receive the feedback, you cannot determine whether the person has received the message the way you intended the person to receive it. You have to get the feedback in order to determine whether meaning has been shared or meaning has not been shared. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes.
Okay.
In addition to that, the linguistic side.
Yeah, the linguistic barrier.
Yeah, language barrier. So,
Yes.
different, assuming you are a Ghanaian and your official language is English,
Yes.
and somebody from Cote d'Ivoire, the official language happens to be
French.
French.
Yes.
So if you people meet and it will be difficult for language understanding,
Yes.
which way would you follow to get this one out?
Which way would you? So that there wouldn't be any communication. Communication cannot take place. So let me give an example. For instance, if I ask you right now, Justice F1, did you get me? Do you understand what I've just said?
Yeah, I'm getting you.
F1. So I'm expecting a response.
Okay.
So you see, you don't understand. That's my dialect. So I'm trying to speak it in the same way. If you should speak yours right now, I wouldn't get it. So communication will not take place, and we can't say that meaning has been exchanged. So that is why we are saying that when you are in a situation where there are two different languages and we cannot understand each other, then it becomes what? A barrier to our communication.
Maybe visual side, you may know that the person, how the person behaving toward you, he's saying something concerning about you, but you don't understand the language.
Yes. Yes.
So that if you have something in mind that the person is telling you something, that one is it not communication?
Yeah. Your question, please.
Yeah, please. With regards to the barriers of communication,
Yeah.
you did mention the physical barrier, psychological, linguistic, and language barrier, transmission. You did.
Yeah.
Please, I want to also find out this. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening, please.
Yeah, in an instance where, let's say, communication is taking place between two people.
Yes.
Or two persons.
Yeah.
And then maybe the giver of the message is, let's say, as it were, was rushing or speaking fast, and the receiver did not get the information.
Yeah.
Under this circumstance, where can we classify this as a barrier of communication?
Okay, so when the person is a fast speaker, and because hello, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
So I think we would put it under physiological barrier, where it has to do with, for instance, the physique of the individual. So I didn't bring that in. So sometimes, for instance, those who are
Thank you very much.
Oh, visually impaired and all that. So it is physiological
Okay.
barrier. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. I have another caller on the line.
Hello.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, madam.
Yes. Your name, your department, and then your level.
I'm Sarah, level 100, English department.
Okay. Please, your question.
Please, the dyadic small group public communication,
Yeah.
is this all under the interpersonal or intrapersonal?
Oh, no. So I talked about types of communication. So under types of communication, I gave 4. So 1, intrapersonal. 2, interpersonal. 3, public communication. And then 4, mass communication. So those are the types of communication. And then under the, please lower the volume of your device because we are getting feedback. Then under the interpersonal, we have dyadic and small group. Hello.
Hello.
Please, did you get that distinction?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. I have another caller on the line. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Your name? Yeah.
Okay, my name is Abednego.
Sorry?
My name is Abednego
Abednego. Okay, from which
Yeah.
department?
from Mathematics Department.
Very good. Your question.
My question is, right now we've looked at the types of communication. So I want to know why those that have visually impaired or people that cannot see,
Yeah.
most of them are also in school.
Yeah.
So how do these people communicate?
So they equally communicate. So when I was defining what communication is, apart from saying that it is the transmission of information from a sender to a receiver, I made mention that we use certain common symbols, signs, behavior, and language. So those who are either visually impaired or whatever, they use the sign. So you know they have brailles, they have their sign language. So all those things will fall under non-verbal communication. That is communicating without words.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much.
You're welcome, Abednego. Okay, so
Hello.
yeah, hello.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning.
Please, Ebenezer, I'm here at Procurement Department.
Okay, Ebenezer, your question.
My question is,
Yes.
you said the communication process is complete when the receiver understands the message. So let's say in the lecture hall, if some of the students do not understand, while others understood, as communication complete, or the communication process, is it complete?
Okay, so I said that we can only say we have communicated when there is exchange of what? Meaning. So I'm sure that I don't know about other lecturers, but what I have seen and what I have experienced is that when any lecturer is teaching or lecturing, there is a point the lecturer would ask any questions, and those who don't understand would ask their questions, and then there would be other explanation for clarification until the belief is that everybody have gotten the concept. Then the lecturer moves on.
But in some cases, the students feel shy to raise up
So
their
that becomes the challenge of the students. So in this discourse community, now you are in the university academic discourse community, and you'll be engaging in a lot of academic discourses, which is the kind of interactions we have here. You are expected not to feel shy, and you are expected because you are building yourself for the future. Anytime you go to the lecture hall, we expect our students to come out boldly and respectfully, ask questions, participate in the lecture. So thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we want to take some questions from those on the Facebook. At a point, I saw someone saying I was speaking fast, so I tried to slow down. So I hope at a point I was able to satisfy the individual. I'm very sorry. Okay, so let's see what other questions we have here. Some are commending that someone, Lavo is saying he's listening from Ejumako and he has learned a lot. Thank you so much. I am Isaac, watching you from South Campus. Please, can you be spelling some of the words that you realize may be difficult? Yes, of course. That is the forms of the non-verbal, which is chronemics, kinesics, ocleics. I'm sure your lecturers would help you during the face-to-face interaction. Forgive me about that. So good morning. I am Nano Kenneth from Linguistics and French class. I have a question. Can your place of location or area be a barrier to communication? Yes, that is the physical barrier. So based on where you are, if it prevents you, if there is so much noise, the place is dark, then we would say that it would prevent you from communicating meaningfully. Okay, someone says, Obed from BBA, please, you did not get the transmission barrier. Okay, so the transmission barrier has to do with the technological device you are using or your choice of a medium or a channel. So I gave an example that your grandmother is in the village. And let's take it that your grandmother is not even educated and you decide that whatever message you want to send to her, you want to use an email. That would become a barrier. That is an example of the transmission, how you are sending the message across. And then sometimes it has to do with internet connection. So there are some places that you go to based on the internet, the network you are using. So are you using Vodafone or you are using MTN? You can have internet connection problems or challenges. And sometimes it is the device you are using. If your telephone or your mobile phone is not strong enough, you get to certain locations and then you realize that you cannot have internet connections, but others in that same location are enjoying internet connection. So that is what the transmission barrier. So Obed, I hope I have been able to help you. Okay, so someone wants to know the difference between linguistic and transmission barrier. So I just explained the transmission barrier. So let's talk about the linguistic or language barrier. So when it comes to linguistic or language barrier, it has to do with the differences in language. So if let's assume you cannot speak Ewe and you meet someone who is speaking Ewe and the person speaks Ewe to you, definitely if you because you can't speak it and you can't understand what the person is saying, it becomes a barrier. Communication cannot take place between you and that individual. Then again, the choice of words or the register that you use can equally be a language barrier. So for instance, currently, even in this radio lecture, some students have asked me to spell, let's say, the kinesics, the ocleics. Let's take it, I was just mentioning them and I didn't explain them. It becomes a language barrier. So the choice of words. Then we are saying that your grammatical error, where she was. No. She was is even correct. She were instead of she was. Or they is. And it's all over the place. It becomes a barrier between you and the other person you are engaged in the conversation with. So that is what linguistic barrier. Okay. Okay, so Cecilia from Ejimako says she has learned a lot. Okay, so those from Ejimako, thank you very much for joining us all the way from Ejimako. Okay, so Rita, I'm sorry. I think your lecturers would help you with the spelling of or the technical words that for the non-verbal communication. Then Aram from the Department of Mathematics, level 100. Your question is psychological barrier. Can we say that the person is indisposed? Would have a psychological barrier? Definitely. When you are indisposed, when we are sick. So if you don't, you see, someone has used indisposed. Someone might not understand the word indisposed. It might be unfamiliar. When we say someone is indisposed, it means the person is not feeling well. So yes, when we are not feeling well, emotionally, we are not sound. So it can become a communication barrier. I'm sure you've had interaction with individuals who are not feeling well. When you are talking with them, because of the condition in which they are, communication might not be meaningful. So it becomes a psychological barrier. Very true. Patrick, yeah, there is no question there. Okay, so Martin from Ejimako. Okay, thank you. Edward J. Linguistic. The communication between a person and a drum. Is it verbal or non-verbal? Hey, Edward. I don't get your question. Communication. I don't know individuals communicate with drums. I know they play drum. So when I am playing drum and I am making sound, definitely the sound would be what? It's non-verbal. Yeah, because it's not, how do I say it? You're not communicating with words. Unless you are adding lyrics to what you are doing, then that becomes verbal. Okay, so Bless from English department. Please, with grammatical error under barriers, can one consider pupils' essay writing? I don't get your question. But even if it is a written communication, we said that when it comes to the verbal, it is both spoken and written. Yeah, so if you write and I cannot read, it becomes a barrier. And I can't read because of all your grammatical errors. Yes, it becomes a barrier. Okay, someone wants me to throw light on monolineal, bilineal, and multiple lineal. So under the types of communication, which is intrapersonal, interpersonal, public communication, and mass communication. We talked about the fact that feedback is very important when it comes to communication. So there are some instances based on the type of communication you are engaged in, no feedback can be received. So where we have a situation where you cannot, the speaker speaks and there is no feedback, let's take it that at the church, when it is not Bible studies, but the pastor is preaching, sometimes we are not given the opportunity to question the pastor. So in that sense, we would say that it is monolineal, where feedbacks are not received. So it is only from the source to the sender, but there is no opportunity or there is no room to take feedbacks. Then that is what monolineal. However, where there is a give and take, I send, and then the sender equally sends. The receiver, sorry, at a point becomes a sender. So there is a feedback. Then that becomes what? Bilineal. Then when we are in our group discussions, where we are about 6 and we are having a group discussion, so at a point one becomes the sender, there is a receiver, and all of us, we are exchanging and giving information, feedbacks. Then that becomes what? Multilineal. So I hope I've been able to help you. Okay. So Bright from Mathematics Department, and your question is, when word is used in an examination that the students taking the particular exams could, then that becomes linguistic barrier, because it means that is an unfamiliar word you have come across, so it becomes a linguistic or a language barrier. Can I explain intrapersonal, the difference between intrapersonal and interpersonal? So intra is within and inter is between. So that's the difference. Intra, within. So intrapersonal is within you or within the individual. So as an individual, all the communication you have within you. So we have motivation, self-talk, reflection, taking a plan or taking a decision within the self. That is what? Intrapersonal, so within. And then interpersonal is between two individuals. So under the interpersonal, we have strictly between just two individuals, which is the dyadic. So between a student and a doctor. So that is what? Or a patient and a doctor. That is dyadic, between two people. And then we have the small group, which can be 3 or more. So between those individuals, that is what? The interpersonal. Okay, someone wants to know the difference between monolingual or bilingual. I think I just did that, so I'm sure. What is your name? You don't have your name here. When I did it a few minutes ago, you've been able to catch up. And then Chikata from English Department, thank you very much for the education. You are welcome. Can I explain prejudice, okay, as a barrier? That is Blessed from English Department. Okay, so prejudice is a negative attitude or perception that you have about a group of people. So I gave 2 examples. Let's take it that there is this particular group or tribal group. You have a certain negative perception about them. Anytime you are engaged in conversation with anyone from that particular tribe, you see that you carry that negative perception or negative attitude into the conversation. So it will prevent you from having a meaningful conversation with that individual. Another instance is we have, excuse me to say, some men who would see women in a certain light. If you have that, then that is what we are referring to as you being prejudiced. So you see women in a certain light. So the group of people is the women. And you have a certain negative attitude. You see women in a certain light. So because of that, anytime any woman is talking with you, you carry that negative attitude into the conversation. It will prevent you from receiving information as well as what? Giving any meaningful information. So that is what we refer to as what? Prejudice. Okay, so Pakwesi, you did not mention your department. You want to know the difference between bilineal, monolineal, and then multiple linear. I think I have done that enough. And then Desmond, please, I want to know if communicating with someone who is a stammerer could also be a barrier. Yes, I think so. That is physiological barrier. Laurentia from Special Education, your question is, please give a little explanation to the V class. Oh, please. Okay, so I don't know, it's not part of my lecture, but I can tell you. We said that we have a hybrid mode for our lecture. So we have the face-to-face. Then you would enroll on the VER class. As we speak, we are trying to get your enrollment key. So when the enrollment key is ready, you would be given the steps. We would guide you on how to enroll onto the virtual class. Then you would be able to enjoy our lecture on the online class. So thank you very much. I hope I've been able to help you. Okay, so Patrick, please, do we have emotional barrier? Yes, so that is what I refer to as the psychological barrier. Okay, so I have a lot of questions. I'm very grateful for your questions. However, I cannot address all of them. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you for sending them to me. Please carry those questions and let's meet during our face-to-face interaction for next week, which would start from Monday. So thank you very much. Today we looked at academic discourse 2 with specific focus on communication. We looked at what communication is, the forms of communication, the types of communication, barriers to communication, and how we are supposed to ensure that we prevent these barriers so that we can exchange meaning anytime we engage in any interaction. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. See you or join us next week for our next radio lecture, Friday morning, same time, 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. Bye. Enjoy your weekend. Sorry.
Well, thank you.